All right. Good morning, Dan. Thanks for joining me. It sounds like you're about ready to take off to someplace warmer.
Yeah, that's the theory anyway. I hear the rut in Texas is perhaps starting to kick off. A little bit warmer temps, but we want a little bit cooler. We'll see what happens. But yeah, just chasing the rut south, taking the family down there, doing a little road trip, and gonna end up down on the Gulf and fishing with Jared, Katie down there for some redfish and yeah, do a little field trip with the fam. It should be fun.
Oh, it'd be a riot. Yeah, Jared's such a great guy and such a great supporter of the podcast as well. And yeah, I know I fished with him. I know him more as a brown trout, rainbows, and then a Pacific Northwest guy as he loves the steelhead and silver salmon and things of that nature. I didn't know he was down there fishing for red, so that ought to be a riot.
Oh yeah, that guy, he's all over the place and really master at everything that you're describing. And he actually took me steelhead fishing a few years ago. I'd never steelhead fished. I know you did, or you do a lot, and you grew up doing it over there in Washington. But what a fun fish, steelhead! Just super crazy, really aggressive, so much strength coming off the ocean there. It really opened my eyes to what a real fight of a fish can be. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. They have nothing but good things to say about redfish. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what I can get into.
Yeah, well, Jared's a super fishy dude. He's also like a great Western hunter as well. I saw he killed a bull this year and
Yep.
had to grind for it. He said it was the toughest one he had ever worked for or put in the most work for. So, yeah, congratulations to him on the bull. And thanks to him for the support of the podcast and the shares. It really helps us out. So, yeah, he's a great guy. So, yeah, go have some fun. Before we get into this podcast, just want to thank our sponsor for today's show, Juniper Mountain Coffee. Really like those guys. They're cut from the same cloth as we are, as they love the outdoors, love to hunt and fish, and support us here on Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal. So we sure appreciate it.
Yep. Great coffee, small family owned business. And I tell you what, I think they made the logo for this partnership with that pack string on it, elk on there. I love it. It's great to see these small family companies really resonate together, and it's been a great partnership and a great product as well. So yeah, check out Juniper Mountain Coffee and use the code Eastmans. You get a discount there, and enjoy it. Send us a comment what you think about the coffee. Leave them a review, and yeah, enjoy those early mornings on a great brew.
Yeah, and I'm loving it too. They sent me a couple bags to try out, and I fell in love with like the roast. So like I was so hooked on their roast that they're a busy company, and so I ran out. So now I'm using the promo code Eastmans to get mine as well, and ordering it through the mail to give them my support because they've got me addicted to their coffee. So yeah, it's just great coffee and great company. So definitely give them the support and use that promo code. It helps us out.
Yep, definitely. And check out other things that we have going on here. Eastman's Elevated podcast, of course, the Eastman's Hunting Journals podcast, the Mule Deer course. We've ran out of all our promo items for the Mule Deer course, but you can still get a discount. Use Brian MDC. Is that correct, Brian? That one's still live and hot, and you can get a little discount there. I am going to be adding to the course this winter. And so, yeah, you'll see some updates, and you get the course for an entire year. So you pay that initial amount, and you have access anytime, anywhere, any place. And yeah, what am I missing, Brian? Beyond the Grid coming out. Oh, which this is news to you, Brian. We're gonna produce your mountain goat hunt and release that on a Beyond the Grid coming up for the Christmas weekend coming up before that.
Oh,
If
that
it,
is super cool.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
reviewed the footage the other day. Looked like an incredible adventure. Of course, British Columbia, just awesome scenery and great shots, by the way, on that goat. That was pretty rad. It's going to be a great episode.
Oh, super cool. Yeah, what great news. Yeah, I can't wait. Usually we have to wait a year to see him produced or see him take shape. So be quick turnaround. But yeah, it's the most extreme country I've ever hunted. It was multiple days in there exploring BC, no other hunters around. It was just an absolute incredible lifetime of a hunt for me. So I can't wait to see it take shape on Beyond the Grid. Super pumped for that.
Yeah, it's really taken off Beyond the Grid. We're doing 11 shows a year now, And so we have a lot of work, but we have a lot of awesome content coming down the pike. I mean, what a great year. I mean, we've talked about this in podcasts before, but super excited to produce some of this content coming up in 2024. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for the comments and the likes and the shares. It helps us out. And subscribe to Eastman's Hunting Journal's YouTube channels. We do a ton of gear reviews. You'll see waterfowl hunts on there to big game hunts. We talk about gear all the time, bow reviews, you name it. It's a good all-around channel. If you're not subscribed, you're not checking out those videos, you're missing out. Make sure you log on to YouTube and check us out on there, which is also where Beyond the Grid is dropped. Usually every Saturday morning that it's scheduled at about 5 a.m. So that'll be coming up. Brian's episode, December 22nd, I want to say. It's the Saturday morning before Christmas. Maybe it's the 23rd. I have to look at my dates. I think Christmas is a Monday this year.
Okay.
So be the 23rd. BC goat hunt with yours truly, Brian Barney. So I'm excited for this one too.
Yeah, I'm stoked to see it come together. Yeah. It's also like, I'm so proud at like the archery content that we're able to put on there. Not that I don't enjoy watching the rifle hunts, but the Beyond the Grid or the Eastmans through my season, through your season, Dan, which is another incredible season for you and great footage, you know. I'm just really proud at the episodes that we're able to produce on there and really show true, like, public land bow hunting, which is a high degree of difficulty, man. Trying to get something arrowed on public ground is tough. But it's just like, I think we have a common thread with our audience that we're doing the same hunting that all these other guys are doing, and that it's available for everybody out there, and then trying to put together the best storylines. And I think, like, I'm proud at how we're able to show the details or why we're successful, that you're able to learn from these videos, that, you know, we're able to explain our camp setup or being mobile or our strategies around it. And you're able to see us at our lowest lows. Like I know that I've looked into the camera and said some words that probably get bleeped out before, just in frustration, you know, how difficult it can be. But I think we're able to walk people through the entire process, which I'm really proud of. I think is really cool.
Yeah, it's been really rewarding, kind of following my passion is not only just hunting and videoing, but able to bring these adventures to life and keeping it real and doing things that get me out of my comfort zone. We've talked about this too on previous podcasts as well. But to really grow, not only as a bow hunter, but as a person. And you really grow when you meet adversity and you get uncomfortable and you're out there on public land and out in the unknown. And that's what it's really, really about. We're adventure seekers. And I think a lot of our audience can resonate with that. That's truly what we're after is adventure and challenging ourselves and getting uncomfortable a time or two and really growing as a person. And I think that's what I really try to portray on these hunts. And not every hunt is equal. All hunts are different. If I could do 6 hunts a year, backcountry, horses, grizzly bears, bugling bulls, I would, but it's not possible. I love it though. And there's nothing more fun than producing a quality adventure that anybody can do. And that's what I'm passionate about. And it's been quite the ride and a lot of fun. And obviously I appreciate you, Brian, doing the same thing. We're cut from the same cloth, and to be able to share that with the world, it sure has been a lot of fun.
Well, you're so good at it. Like, we push each other to get better as well. Like, I love when your videos drop. I love watching them. I usually send you a text after I watch them, like how good they are. So it's like also a bit like, you know, you push me to be better on the video side of things. And you're so good at telling the story and capturing the shot and putting it together. And I know how difficult it is out there. So you definitely push me to be better on that video side of things, but I am really proud of what we put out. So yeah, go check those out. Check out the magazines, Eastman's Bow Hunting Journal, Eastman's Hunting Journal. Dan pushes me to be better in there, as well as he writes great insight into his articles. And man, we're just having fun over here and getting ready for application season. And that's what today's podcast is all about.
Yeah, lots of great conversation. It's a Q&A, I mean, ultimately, but we dive into some details of what lights our fire and what our strategy is when it comes to applying to Western states. So hopefully you guys enjoy this one, and be sure to look out for your name as we answer everybody's question. I think we got to all of them, so let's jump right in.
Yeah, let's jump in. All right. Well, yeah, good to connect with you, man. That ought to be an awesome trip down there to Texas to get after some of those whitetails and redfish, man. I'm pumped for you. You're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. Something new, different time of year, and of course, rutting whitetails. Whether I'm along for the ride or behind the trigger, it doesn't matter to me. I'm just happy to be there and hunt during the rut.
Yeah, you're gonna get your wife into some rutting bucks, huh?
Yep, that's the plan. Get her a buck and hunt some pigs too. Stop along the way to San Antonio down to Corpus Christi and catch some redfish. That's been kind of a bucket list item, I guess, so to speak. Red fishing down on the coast, getting out of the cold weather and doing something a little bit different. And I hear those redfish are just maniacs out there, just full of fight. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's a bucket list for me too. Yeah, they look like such an aggressive fish, and it looks like targeting them is really fun, like in those back channels and in those like those grassy swamp like type country. And then it's a lot of sight fishing and then streamers and getting them to chase. So yeah, man, I'll be excited to hear how you do down there. It sounds like fun.
Heck yeah, I can't wait. I love sight fishing.
Yeah, oh, it's the best, right?
Yep.
Well, good. Yeah, I think we're going to get into application strategies as we're starting to get into that time of year. So, yeah, just want to kind of dive into it. It's so tough nowadays. Like tags are just getting tougher and tougher to come by, but there's still some great opportunities out there. And so, like, I think you share a lot of the same strategies that I share, where I just want to get tags and opportunities and go hunt, and not that there's also some tags or some units that you can take chances on and strike out and not find the critters that you're looking for. So it's a bit of a delicate balance, and it's like I do a mix and match of over the counter general season. I do a mix and match of easy to draw tags, and then I also have some premium tags that I put in for that's kind of like my lotto ticket that I'm hoping to hit. So that's kind of like the basis of my strategy. And I guess we'll get into it more, but I think the main thing is just to be hunting every year. That experience is such a great learning tool that you have to kind of dial it in, figure out the time that you have and the hunts that you really want to do, and then get pretty aggressive trying to get that first couple tags of the season just to make sure that you're bow hunting somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly. It's that spectrum of kind of what you just lined out there, the easy to acquire tags to the, maybe the easier to draw type of tags that you can count on, maybe one of those, and then shoot for the moon so you have something. So yeah, there definitely is a big strategy. It's not as easy as it used to be. I was having a conversation with my buddy the other day, how like, and even just as soon as 2017, in Idaho, you could buy an elk tag in August and go elk hunting. And, those days are over, obviously, but applicants for, hunting licenses and just tags in general has gone up 180% since 2017, 2018. And so, yeah, it's just a different world out there now as far as acquiring a tag. And it's funny, I see tons of stuff on social media about it's influencers are the reason why there's so many more hunters, and it's like guys like us that are building content and whatever, putting YouTube videos out, and that's the reason why we've ruined it for everybody. And I don't think that's it at all. I think there's some guys with some pull that have like huge numbers in the realm in social media, and they've kind of got into hunting, and I think that's kind of pulled a factor to it. But that's probably a podcast in its own, is what's happened, like where are all these hunters coming from, or should I say applicants coming from. I think there's a lot of reasons behind it, but it's very interesting, to say the least. And once again, it's become difficult to get tags. And so, yeah, you got to be creative.
Well, yeah, it is like it's its own podcast in itself, like you stated. And it's really like, well, what do you want to figure out where to put blame, or like it's a double-edged sword because we need hunters out there and we need bow hunters out there to get bow hunting seasons, to keep our hunting rights, to keep like this renewable resource going, to where if we lose recruitment or we don't have enough hunters or a positive view on hunting, like we'll lose it all together in a lot of these states, you know? And so you do need hunter numbers. And then, but it's a double-edged sword, as then it gets tags are tougher to come by. And you mentioned 2017 in Idaho, but yeah, man, when I first started, I could draw all the best units with archery, you know, units now that take 10 to 15 points, and I could draw them with 0 to 2 points when I first started. But things just change, and there is a popularity in hunting because they're, you know, it's like such a fruitful endeavor. It's like really nice to have a passion in your life that you're willing to work for. It's really nice to have the wild organic protein. Like there's a lot of reasons why guys do it. And you know, sure, our articles and podcast and videos, you know, I'm sure they draw people to some of the stuff we're doing. But in the same breath, like there's still opportunity out there. You just have to get more creative with your application strategy. You have to take chances. Like the public land hunter, it's not just a guarantee anymore, and it's not a guarantee with even some of these premium tags. Like you have to build your hunter skill set, and then you have to take chances, and you have to go learn units and spend time in them. And you don't figure them out in the first year hunting them. It can be a multi-year process, and also a process of striking out and going, okay, well, I've got to try a new unit. And so you know, it's like there's two routes to go. Like you can go outfitted or guided if you're coming from a different state and you're actually paying somebody for their access or for their knowledge or a combination of both. Or if you're a public land warrior, you've got to spend your own time and money learning these different places in different states. But yeah, I try not to get too negative. It's like, what good does it do to try to sit here and figure out who's to blame for it? Or, you know, that doesn't change the situation or scenario we're in. And I love to hunt, you know, mule deer and elk out west. And so for me, like, I just have to continue to play the game and find these different locations in these ways to obtain tags and opportunities so I can go have adventures out there. And so, yeah, for me, I think it's like, you know, it does no good to get upset and try to argue over why it's happened or why there's more people hunting. I think you just have to move forward and make sure that you're trying to find a tag for yourself so you can be out there enjoying it, you know, to the fullest.
Yep. Yeah. And I think what really resonated with me by that last statement is just getting out there and putting forth the effort. But bow hunters, whether it was 10 years ago or now, you have to be resourceful if you're going to be successful. Like resourcefulness is probably on the top of the list or in the top 3 traits that you have to get good at, you have to be proficient at if you want to be successful, especially on public land bow hunting nowadays. Just being able to adapt to the tag situation, not only to that, but hunting situations, unit situations, management situations. There's all these things, all these factors that play in to whether you're going to get a tag and if you're going to be successful or not on a hunt. And so being able to see that and adapt as needed and be resourceful is probably the most important trait of it all when it comes to acquiring tags and developing a plan or multiple plans.
Oh, that's such a good point, Dan. Yeah, and I think there's multiple resources, right? As we've have our TagHub 2.0, which we've revamped with the mapping system, and there's so much information in that. You know, and I used it for years. It used to be in the back of the Eastman's magazine. Then we came out with TagHub, an internet resource, and then you know, and then now we've revamped our TagHub to make the information a little bit more organized and accessible on there, and also to have it tied in with the maps. But these resources, and there's other companies too, and it's like we're a trusted company, and I've used a lot of our information over the years just learning units. So being resourceful, like you're saying, you like dive into the statistics, and every state agency reports different statistics, and you can go straight to the game agency, or you can use a resource like our TagHub for $100 a year, and you dive in and you're able to see success rates, not only for a bow, but you're able to see it for a rifle. You're able to see harvest statistics. You're able to see population objectives. You're able to see buck to doe ratios, and then you're able to dive into the rifle success, and you're able to kind of break all this down to kind of read through the lines of the statistics. And then it's not only using these resources or state game agencies, it's also like using the Pope and Young Club to see where the big ones come from for archery, or the Boone and Crockett. And then for me, it's not just the unit numbers that I go by, because I can show up in a unit and it's all juniper pinion and I can't glass it, or I can't get through it. It's so thick that you've got to like still hunt through it. Well, that doesn't do me any good. So I've also got to look at the topography through Onyx and through Google Earth, and look at these units that I'm applying for and make sure that they're huntable for me, as I like, more open terrain. I like big mountains, but I want to know what I'm getting into as far as access, as far as pressure. And so it's basically like, I am studying up on each state that I'm going to apply for, and spending hours, going through these resources to dial it in to come up with my couple top units. And my couple top units are not just going to be these blue chip 20-point units, because I've learned a lot about statistics and odds through applying in these different states. And man, I have no chance at winning the lotto in a 1 in 7 million chance. I can't even win on a 1 in 300 chance, or a 1 in 30 chance. Like, you learn real quick, like what kind of statistics or odds you need to draw a tag. And so it's not about finding the best units anymore. Like, now you have to be resourceful, like you're talking, to find these good units that have good potential, but can also be drawn with minimal points.
Yep. Yeah, that's what it's all about. And that might be hunting less than ideal situations. Maybe the unit has way more private than you like to deal with. But let me tell you, if there's a will, there's a way. I've had tags in my pocket that were easy to draw, but virtually no access. And I've found those small parcels of state. I've got permission through private to hunt, those small parcels. I've talked to ranchers. I've asked how I can give back, or what I can do to help them out to gain access. And that might take more than a year or two. But if I have an easy tag to get, that's half the battle. And so that's where that resourcefulness comes into play, just like you described too, is that constant drive, the constant work. And it is a lot of work, the research and time to go through TagHub and look at these statistics and build yourself a plan. But I tell you what, if you put in the time and the work and do a little bit of networking and talk to guys, doing your homework is going to pay off for you when you end up in the field. And that's half the battle, is putting in the work. So anyway, I think there's a lot of aspects to building a strategy, and hopefully we can answer some questions, and maybe through some of these questions you can kind of get an idea of what we do and what our thought process is when we encounter some of the issues.
Yeah, 100%. That's really good point about being resourceful and getting permission. The other thing that I do is I scout a lot of times during season. So if I fill out, I've got over a week and a half of scouting just during hunting season this year, where I fill out on a tag, and then I spend an extra couple days of cruising around and finding access and seeing where the populations are and seeing if it's worth applying for again. I did that for elk. I've done it for rutting muleys. You can go look at the winter ranges. Like, you've got to find an edge, and to find an edge, it is like putting in the work, spending the money on gas. It is spending the time on TagHub, spending the time at game agencies, and then also the mapping system. So yeah, and you mentioned Idaho, and I've seen it. I just got interviewed about Montana, and I moved to Montana in 1999. And the interviewer, it was for Montana Bowhunters Association for their magazine they put out. And he asked me if hunting's changed in the last, since I moved to Montana. And oh my gosh, has it ever? It's like two different worlds, but we have to continue to evolve with it, And so even though it's changed and it's got tougher, and they're there's still opportunity out there if you're willing to put in the work. And I'm constantly finding new locations, new spots, new units. I'm on the hunt. Like, I hunt existing units, so that's a bit of my strategy throughout the year. Is what I do. And I'm really fortunate that I get to bow hunt a lot and plan to even spend more time doing it. But how I do it is I break down my season. So I've kind of got early season mule deer, which are August, the 1st of September. Then I go into archery elk, which is September into early October. And then I go into some pre-rut hunts that are in late October, even into early November. And then I go into some rut hunts that can be November, December, or even January down in Arizona. But you talk about how things change. You talk about Idaho 2017 used to be able to buy an over-the-counter elk tag. If you went on this year, the tags just went on sale December 1st. There was over 45,000 people in line to try to get elk tags, and they're selling out quicker than before. And I don't think it's all from influencers or whatever. It's just there's just more people enjoying traveling across the lower 48 or across the U.S., taking advantage of these other states and the opportunities they have. And so, yeah, man, you have to be really crafty and and get lucky in the draws, but there's still an opportunity to get tags every year. And whether that's looking at these states, like definitely your home state is your best opportunity. You in Wyoming, me in Montana. I know that I'll have a deer and elk tag every year, a bear tag every year, and then I know I've got a pretty good chance to draw an antelope tag archery only. So, I can kind of plug those into my calendar, and now I can start looking for early season hunts. And what I'm doing, I'm not just building this year, I'm building for years future. And so as I start to apply for all these, I know what my good chance at drawing an early season tag this year. I know that I've got the points to draw a Colorado tag that I like, so that's going to be the early season one I go for. I'm pretty aggressive in some of these other states, so I may have a chance in a Utah or a Nevada there that are an August hunt, where Colorado is going to be a September hunt. So I can start to kind of build my schedule, but then I'm building points in other states that I'm going to draw those early tags in the future. I know once I get 2-3 points in a Wyoming, or I get my a lucky draw in New Mexico or Arizona, I'm getting quite a few points. So like, I know those tags will be coming up. And then I think too, it's like looking at these states that are less popular, looking at Oregon. Now, Oregon's mule deer used to be over the counter, and they've gone to a draw system now. Like, everything's changing right before us. But looking at the Oregon or Dakotas or Nebraska or the Kansas, or like a lot of these states that are like lesser known for hunting these species, you can actually find some tags there as well.
Yep. Yeah. Once again, resourcefulness. What resonated with me on that last little segment that you were talking about too is a long-term plan. And, even thinking very long term, 10 years out. That's kind of one of the reasons why I like to hop around in my home state of Wyoming, elk hunting and deer hunting, because I'm building this knowledge bank of animals of the area, and I'm logging rut activity for elk in September, what the deer populations are like early in September or August, and I'm building this bank. And of course, it's so much more difficult for a guy back east to be able to do this, or from the Midwest to just spend the time out there, like what you were talking about, of just scouting during hunting season, during the season. And that's what can be so difficult, especially with elk, because you can go scout an area for elk, but it's all going to change once the rut hits. Usually there's some instances, maybe some of the desert units, or like maybe the breaks, or some of these areas that the herds, they don't really have a winter and a summer range. It's kind of just a nomadic thing. They move about the country throughout the year. But then some of the mountainous areas too, you have kind of like a summer range for these elk I'm talking about, and then they have like a rutting area depending on the water. So there's all these things that play into it. But I'm building this knowledge bank over a long period of time, so I have these options in the future. So if I need to go out and hunt an elk on a general tag in Wyoming, at any point in time in the next few years, I have plan A, B, C, and D that I can go to, and I'm probably going to get into action and find animals, barring there's no natural disasters or habitat changes, like dramatic habitat changes or population changes that's really going to affect the hunting. For example, like Western Wyoming, the die-off, 80% die-off is what they predicted or what they saw this last spring. And then you factor in the check station numbers this fall, and it directly reflected an 80% decline in population. So I wrote that off this year, and I might for the next few years, Western Wyoming deer hunting, to not even go. And yeah, there's still deer around. There's still bucks. Could I probably find a buck? Yeah, probably. But there's a part of me that feels bad for that deer herd. So I just take time off from it, and it just is what it is. And it's a disaster. I mean, what happened in Western Wyoming with the deer numbers and the decline, and maybe it never comes back. But I do know I could go back into some of my spots and find bucks if I had to. Am I going to have to work a lot harder to find a good buck? Yes. I've talked to a couple guys that hunted it this last year. Very difficult. Are there bucks out there? Yes. But it's not what it used to be before the winter. So these are some of the things that you have to plan and factor into is being up to date on the current events for your area too. And I'll kind of watch the news, and maybe before I apply for a tag, I'll search up New Mexico or Arizona and see if there's anything goofy that happened in a unit that I've applied for. Maybe I've never stepped foot in it, or talk to a local contact down there and just make sure all is well down there and it's still, something to apply for. But, with natural disasters, especially like the winter last year, things can change drastically. So yeah, current events, that's another huge thing just to keep tabs on. It's a lifestyle, Brian. It really is, right?
Mm-hmm.
This whole tag application strategy, it's a lifestyle. It's being involved 24/7, 365, being aware of news, being aware of management practices, studying those regulations. Did they increase tags? Did they lower tags? Can I look back at years prior and see what management was? Do I call the biologist? I mean, the list goes on and on and on of the work that a hunter can do to prep for their tag application strategy.
Yeah, you nailed it, Dan. It is a lifestyle, man, and it's like we are always taking in information. Not only do I have files in every state, but I've also, like you, I've built this knowledge base in all these different states where I've hunted, 5 or 6 different units in almost every state out there. And I'm gaining knowledge. And not only that, as I drive across the country for another tag, I'm always looking at the habitat. And if there's snow on the ground, I'm looking for tracks, and I may stop and glass, and then I may look up the unit, and then talking to guys like you say, keeping your tabs on things. And like that Western Wyoming, I got the same report that you did, and I talked to other hunters that were in the unit and heard the same thing. And yeah, do I think I could go in there and find bucks? Probably, but the numbers are way down, But then you go to another state that had a bad winter that's maybe right across the border, and maybe their deer herd had like good winter range and they were able to get out of the snow and they fared great. And I saw bucks of all different age classes. I saw does with the fawns where they weren't affected, And so it is keeping up on the current trends of these places. And that's either, with your own eyes or by talking to guys that were in the unit, talking to biologists, but just keeping like your thumb on the pulse of all these different states and the trends of these different units, so you don't burn all your points and go into a unit like Western Wyoming where the deer herds were absolutely decimated. And while we're on the subject, Dan, I did get a question on my social media from MJ about Wyoming. So I'll pose this to you as it's your home state and you know it really well. Okay. So he just posted this question. He has 5 Wyoming elk points. Also 5 pronghorn. I know Wyoming had a huge mule deer winter kill. From what you are hearing, how did the elk fare? I have no Wyoming experience, but wanting to put in for a general tag in 2024. So Thoughts on this? Like, I know that elk seem to fare better in these bad winters than deer. And I did get reports in these same areas that the elk numbers were still fairly strong. Is that what you heard or what you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think what I saw and what I heard, Utah did suffer some elk winter kill loss. Wyoming were fine. Elk, they really do buck winters pretty well, and it takes a lot to really hurt an elk and to kill, elk during winter. We do have our feed grounds in western Wyoming as well for those elk, and so and we have great habitat, winter habitat. So as a whole, the elk in Wyoming weren't really affected. I didn't hear of any, I didn't see any, and results from hunting this last fall is just as good as it was the year before and the year before as far as numbers go and quality and all that sort of thing. So the one thing that you could watch for though in after dismal winters or really heavy winters, it can displace elk, it can displace movements, and so there may not be as many in one area as there was the year before, and their habits and their movements can be a little bit different, which I did see, and that can happen unit to unit, mountain range to mountain range, based on a lot of factors as well. But anyway, to make a short answer long, no, I didn't see any effect, and don't expect any effect on elk in Wyoming moving forward from winters,
Yeah.
not at all.
We saw the same thing in our valley, at least from personal experience and talking to guys, is there was some mule deer die off for sure from the winter, but the elk seemed to fare fairly well. But if you go and look at the data at the check stations, there was not as many elk killed. Now that can be a positive for next year, but I believe there weren't many killed because we didn't get the weather and we had good feed up high during the rifle season where those bulls didn't come out and they didn't get slaughtered. Towards the end of the season, I did see some elk start to come down, but more like the cows and smaller bulls, less than the mature bulls were able to stay in the mountains. But it's another thing to keep your finger on the pulse is the management of these states, like the management of Montana and our elk herds, which seem fairly stable, but our mule deer populations, we had some die off last year, but a lot of it's just mismanagement, or I'll just say management. It's like, I don't want to call out the game and fish in Montana, but they don't manage per unit for mule deer, and they sell these non-resident combination deer and elk tags. And so, in my valley, it's like you can hardly even find a buck, even a 2-point, because everybody's got an elk and deer tag and everybody comes here to elk hunt and they end up shooting a mule deer if they see it, even if it's a smaller buck, especially if they're out of state and don't have a lot of mule deer experience. And so, guys around here can hardly even find a legal buck anymore, and same thing like Eastern Montana, like that place was going gangbusters like a few years ago. There was a lot of good bucks and good age class on public ground, and now it's just decimated. In fact, the FWP, like I talked to a warden out there. I was out with my daughter and we were trying to get permission on a block management. And he told me, don't even bother. He says, I've seen 3 deer in the last 2 months of driving all these roads out. There's no deer left on this block management. And it wasn't a die off or anything. I think a lot of it was management. You were able to shoot does on your general tag, which they did make a change this year and change that off. But not only the populations, but with all these public land, there's like a general rifle season during the rut. And so all these guys flock to this public ground. And then not only do they kill a lot of these bucks or a lot of these does, but they also push the populations onto the private ground where then there's just not the deer numbers on the public ground, which makes it really difficult. So it's just like another thing to try to keep your thumb on or keep your thumb on the pulse. And hopefully Montana's proactive and makes some changes. But I've definitely seen our deer herds go way downhill in a lot of different units for sure.
Yeah, that's one thing where I kind of do feel bad for mule deer in the fact that they're kind of a fragile species. The elk outcompete them, and if there gets to be a lot of elk, it does push them out and numbers decline. So that's just one instance. And then, you throw in like what you're talking about and some of the management in Montana. And I know in Region 7, they were giving out 5,000 B licenses there for a few years. on those poor mule deer does, and then you're trying to keep landowners happy. I was reading the 2023 elk management plan that FWP released over the last couple of days, and it's like, man, like I'm not jealous of FWP trying to manage elk or deer or just wildlife in general in Montana because of that private land interface. And you're trying to keep owners happy. They're complaining because they got too many animals, and the public's complaining because there's not enough animals on public. And it's just one of those things that it's just so difficult to keep everybody happy. And I think too, like what we've seen over the last couple decades in Montana, to answer some of these questions too, is the population shifts in Montana. So since, and some of this is my opinion, but this is what I've seen numbers wise prove it, and current management practices also kind of point this direction. But you have the predators in the western part of the state, grizzly bears, which are unmanaged, running around like rats. There's so many bears. Wolves, which are managed, and then lions, which are managed too, of course. But the western part of the state is mainly public land. And if you look at this for Region 1 example in Northwest Montana, the population objectives are so insanely low, under objective, that you have these large tracts of public land that are filled with predators. They don't have a lot of elk and deer, and so it displaces a lot of hunters. All these flathead guys are headed out east where they can find deer and elk because they just don't exist in Region 1 anymore. And so that's just a small snippet of, the difficulties to manage deer and elk when your hands are tied with grizzly bears, and bears are number one on fawn and calf recruitment or lack thereof, as far as killing them during calving and fawning season. There's been studies done. Bears are so hard on calves and fawns, and that's ultimately what drives populations, are calf and fawn recruitment. And when you don't have that, you just lose your herds. And so that's another hurdle that Montana's seeing. So as you move forward in your application strategy, keep that in mind. I mean, yeah, the populations are growing in a lot of areas in central to eastern Montana, where it's majorly private land. And so you're dealing with access issues, and you're dealing with, everybody else is flocking there too, because that's where the animals are, but you can't get on to hunt deer and elk. So anyway, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, and Montana's in a tough place. And as you know, Montana, they manage for opportunity. So like what Brian kind of described, there's that everybody can get a tag, and you can shoot basically any antlered mule deer in much of the state in these general areas. And so, yeah, if you want to kill a deer, yeah, go to Montana. You could probably find a deer to kill. But coming from Montana and moving to Wyoming, I do have an appreciation for a lot of the areas that are managed more for age class. And I hate to say trophy quality, but because what I'm interested in is killing an older age class animal. Score really doesn't matter when it comes to harvest, in my opinion. And so I appreciate some of the states that have, management for trophy and a little bit of opportunity as well, because I feel like there needs to be both for sure.
Yeah, spot on. Well, yeah, it's like, and a lot of this is just our own theories. And like you say, I don't want the tough job of trying to manage wildlife throughout Montana. Just you base these theories and ideas on what I've seen over the last 25 years in Montana. And so it's just good to keep your finger on the pulse. And also, like I was able to write Montana FWP about a lot of my ideas and thoughts about management improvements they can make. And we are going to have to make some changes, as we have so many new residents that are moving to Montana that now get resident deer and elk tags. And to hunt the entire rut with a rifle for mule deer across all our general season, that management is not going to be able to keep in place and still have opportunity for everybody out there. So they're going to have to make some changes, and I try to put some ideas out there so they can talk about them, so we can have meetings about them and see if we can make some adjustments to our management management to hopefully keep this good hunting. But it's just another thing to keep your finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
And I'm not a doom and gloom guy. I don't think that public land hunting is done, and I don't think it's done in any state. You just have to work harder at it. You have to put in more time in your research, more time in your scouting, hunt more units, be willing to strike out, hunt hard during season. Like, man, I mean, I had a great season in 2023, and so did you. And I plan to have another good one in 2024 and hunt these healthy populations of these animals out there by working hard. But Dan, we could do a whole podcast, which we are going to do a podcast on our application strategy, but we better get to some of these questions, as I've posed like a lot of questions out there for guys to ask so we can answer them directly. So I'm just going to start in on some questions and then you jump in. I know we got a bunch of these things to get to here. So how do you think the new Wyoming non-resident price structure will change the draw odds in the state?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to change anything draw odds wise. It seems like there's plenty of hunters, and I've talked to a lot of friends and just guys that are non-residents and ask them about price increases, and it doesn't matter for most guys. They're going to hunt, they want to hunt, they're going to apply. It's what they love to do, and it doesn't matter what it costs. I mean, once it gets crazy, if it got to like $3,000 for an elk tag or whatever, maybe it would start having an effect. But usually the guys that are willing to travel and come out west to hunt, whether it's $600 or $2,000 for a tag, I don't see much change. That's my hunch.
Yep, I'm with you. That came from Tyler Jacobson. So I've got another one here. This comes from Jordan. And it said, I will be in Idaho next season in mountain whitetail country. I'm a mule deer bow hunter, and while I have stumbled upon some big whitetails, I do know the difference in habitat. What do you look for in a mountain whitetail spot?
I do not know the difference in habitat. So he's asking, what to look for. So, and jump in. I want you to jump in on this too, Brian.
Yep.
So, in general, mule deer, they're browsers. Whitetails are grazers. And so that can vary a little bit on, the feed that they're seeking out. Now, growing up in Northwest Montana in Region 1, in some of the areas that we shot whitetails in or hunted whitetails in, there's not really like a lot of graze. There's not open meadows. There's not a lot of that stuff. The thing with whitetails is they're very, very adaptable. I think I've heard numerous times that if a nuke went off, the three animals that would be left are whitetail deer, coyotes, and cockroaches, because they can adapt to about any situation. And so, in my opinion, I don't think I would look per se to a natural habitat in the brush country or in the mountain whitetail country like he's referring to. But what I do know is whiteys did gravitate to fresh logging units growing up. And so we would hunt logging units in this mountain whitetail country, and we would usually find good numbers of whitetail deer. So that's kind of off the top of my head what I would say to that.
Yeah, it's great advice, Dan. I think I'm definitely not the guy to be answering whitetail questions, but I'll take a shot at it anyway. So the mountain country, I think how I would attack that hunt is, that you're putting in for a good whitetail unit is you can look at statistics, and I think I just start to dial in where this population is. Like, I'd get to the unit and I'd be driving roads, I'd be glassing, I'd be looking for tracks, and then once I start to see them, gravitate towards the freshly logged country, like you're talking about, Dan, or once I could start to hike some ridge lines and go, gosh, there's a bunch of sign and tracks in here. I think I need to focus in here, because the mountain whitetail, it does seem like it's more random throughout country than it is like hyper focused in one spot in the unit. They seem to kind of be all over through that mountain terrain. So I think I'd get there and I try to dial in an elevation. I try to dial in a habitat. I try to look for tracks and sign, and I try to kind of dial it in that way if I was going about it.
Yeah. That brings up a good point too, is old units too, like old logging units and, areas that do have a little bit more grays. I mean, that's how we hunted them, and that's how they hunt them in western Montana, northwest Montana, is logging units, sit units, whether they're old or new. We used to walk through the new cut units, but whitetail gravitate towards that grays a little bit more if it's available, but they do well on browse. I mean, it's unbelievable. You go into some of these new units and they're munching away on down Douglas fir needles, and that's what they do in the winter too. I used to find sheds up in Montana around fallen trees. And so I would go around in March, April, and look for green fallen trees, and then I could glass them. I could see them. And I could see the needles were eaten off of them, and that meant whitetails. And I would go and make laps, or comb those trees, that like those big Doug fir trees with that Douglas fir pine needles that they gravitate to and eat. And talk about browse, but man, they tear it up, and I found plenty of antlers doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's keep moving here. That was from Jordan Solido 4. So thanks for the question there. Cameron T823. With point creep getting worse every year, how would you recommend a new Western hunter into building their point catalog to have a reasonable chance to continually hunt year to year?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's just finding these out of the way units like we've been discussing and trying to build a plan in these states. And so, yeah, there's no feasible way that you're going to make a plan to draw these units that are 10 to 20 point units anytime in the future. So I think it's just like picking a state that you've heard of, or that you know a unit, or that you've done the research and your research points you to a couple different units, and there's a reasonable chance. I think it's trying to look for these places that you can draw with 0 to 3 points. So then, you're building those points as you're drawing that unit in one of those states, and you're also researching a separate state where it's got a draw of 0 to 3 points. And so I just kind of stagger my hunts that way, where I'm constantly building points. I know, this year I've got a good chance at Colorado. The next year I'll have a good chance in, say, Nevada or Wyoming. And then, so I'm just building these points in different places, but I'm really researching and looking for these units that I can draw on lower points. But then, down in Arizona, I know that they have a general deer tag that I can hunt in December or January if I get on their app at the right time. Now you have to, as a non-resident, same thing in Arizona, they're not just giving away general season tags. You have to actually get on and get them. I believe it wasn't December 1st, but the date came and went for getting an Arizona tag for this January, and I did not pick one up. But the whole time while I'm looking to hunt these over-the-counter units, I'm building towards this unit that takes 7 to 8 points to draw, and I'm just about there. So you just got to start diving into the research and building these points in different places and looking for these opportunities on low point hunts, and then starting to stagger these states out so you have a place to hunt every year.
Yep. Yeah, it's about staggering them out and looking into draw systems. Like, for example, we could run through a few of them real quick. Like Nevada, I know you hunt Nevada a bunch, Brian. They do not give out a lot of bow tag or like archery tags for elk. And so I don't apply for elk in Nevada. It takes a lot of points. It's a lot of years. There's not a lot of permits. And so I don't bother with Nevada. That's my mentality for archery elk. Utah, same thing. They don't give out a ton of tags. It's a shot in the dark. It is a fairly complicated draw system where the majority of tags go to the upper tier point holders, and then there's a bonus draw where everybody kind of has a chance. But I mean, we're talking 10 to 20 years there. You just have to decide if you want to pay the money to buy points every year and invest that much money for a maybe in 10 to 20 years, depending on what you choose. Colorado, more tags, more animals. I feel like there's a few more units that you can draw with less points, like what Brian's talking about. And then there's other units that take 26, 28, max points as well. So I think the first thing that you have to do is figure out your schedule and your plan and what you're looking for. I mean, do you want to hunt every year, or do you want to hunt Colorado once in your life? Or do you want to hunt Utah once in your life? If you do, you're applying for limited entry. If you don't, or if you do want to hunt it more than once in your life, you're going to apply for maybe some of the general tags and get out there every few years, like Brian's saying. If you don't want to hunt it, but maybe once in your life, then yeah, hold out for a limited entry and kind of keep tabs on units to apply for, and do that with all the Western states.
Yep.
And before you know it, you'll build a plan just based on what you're looking for and what your desires and what you have time for.
Yeah, well, it's spot on. And Nevada makes sense for me because you have to buy an out-of-state hunting license to be able to apply. So maybe for some guy applying for elk, you have to factor in buying this $150 license. Maybe it's gone up now every single year for a tag you won't draw. And when you add it up, it doesn't work. But me, I like to hunt aggressively for mule deer units in Nevada. So I'm buying that license every year. So then putting in for elk isn't a big deal. And I've got a unit that, is around 6 to 10 points that I've hunted with a buddy that I know really well. And so, that's the unit I'll go for. So I'm not out much because I'm already buying my license. So you're right, Dan, in that you have to find these states and these units that make sense for you. The other thing, like a secret to look out for too, is new tags that come available. And I try to keep my finger on the pulse, but I missed it last year. So I have two buddies that drew Utah limited entry late season elk tags. Those late season elk tags and these premium units for archery just came available last year. I didn't catch it in the regs. I didn't apply for them. I have one buddy that's hunting a really good unit right now with his bow that he drew. I have another buddy that drew a really good Utah unit in this late season. So watching out for these tags. Remy Warren drew a desert sheep archery only tag that came available last year. He had his finger on the pulse, had a bunch of points. He was able to draw a desert sheep tag, which is really tough to come by. And he made good on the tag and arrowed a heck of a desert ram just by watching these states and seeing which new units and new opportunities come up. So it pays to pay attention to these, where you can kind of beat the statistics and the odds as guys keep applying for the same units and they don't see these new ones come up, where you can get some really good draw odds.
Yep, for sure. And we try to talk about all the new stuff coming up in our MRS and on TagHub. You're a member of TagHub, and you're going to see those updates. You're going to see us, talking about new units and new hunts like that. What Brian's referring to in Utah was the late archery units, and what they're gravitating towards in Utah is more of an opportunity style of management, coming off of a more of a trophy style of management. They're trying to meet the demands of the general public. There's been a lot of public that have, been saying they want more opportunity in the state. So this is kind of what Utah is doing. More tag allocations, lowering the age class structure for what they're managing for. And some of these off-season hunts are just spreading out the pressure and spreading out the seasons and the tags to give hunters opportunity. So yeah, there's a lot of changing, and it'll go on every year moving forwards. States will be doing the same thing, maybe not on such a big scale that Utah's doing, but we're going to be seeing it, I'm sure, for years to come in all these Western states.
Yeah, so maybe if you want to hunt elk, like Arizona offers late season tags in some of these premium units. It's a tougher hunt, not being the rut, but you can draw it with half or a third the points that you can draw a rut tag in some of these units. And so that's like an opportunity. Like, you have to be crafty in today's day and age and think outside the box. And a lot of these off-season dates are a way to be able to hunt these really good units with your bow and be able to draw them, in a timely manner.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. All right, moving on here. Here's a Wyoming question. I can just read this and answer this one, Brian. Is Tights 06, will Wyoming get rid of non-resident preference points in the next 5 years? No, I don't think it'll happen. I don't think the outfitters will allow it. There's a large outfitter pool in the state. That's the whole reason to have preference points for non-residents, so they can acquire tags. Now there are a lot of areas, and point creep's a thing. I would like to see these states go to more of a bonus style system. So there will be points, but a bonus style system where your points are squared or cubed or whatever, just is going to be a little bit more effective because of point creep's an issue. But yeah, they're never going to get rid of points in Wyoming. All right, moving on. Colton Henson 30. I'm looking to buy an early season mule deer tag. What's the best chance at getting one?
Yeah, an early season mule deer tag. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities out there. The high country stuff has gotten more popular and tougher to draw. So a lot of times if you're looking into a different habitat in the early season, like the desert or foothills or breaks or badlands or something like that, you can definitely end up with an early season tag. If you're looking to hunt the high country, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty aggressive in Nevada. They have good mule deer populations there. You know, Utah, like you can definitely get some of their high country tags with 0 points in and through there where I've killed great bucks. Now you are going to be dealing with Salt Lake City hunting pressure and, you got to look into these, dive into these units. There's places in Colorado that you can draw with minimal points. And so I think it's just going to be getting a bit more aggressive with your applications, looking at the draw odds and the statistics in these states and finding a unit that you can take a chance on. And I know, I've killed high country mule deer in probably 20 different units across the lower 48. And so there's really good places there. You just have to take chances and dive into them or do the legwork with your drawing odds and harvest statistics. I'd say with a bow, mule deer in the high country, it's not a very high success rate. If you see a success rate that's 20-30%, that's pretty good for early season mule deer. A lot of the success rates hover around that 10%. That for me is worth the chance to go in there because I think I hunt within the top 10% of the guys that are hunting there. So that gives me a good chance. I just want to see some good harvest data. Then I'll look at the rifle season. And if I see in the rifle season that they're getting 50% or 40 to 60% success rates, well, there's deer in there that are getting killed in the rifle season, and I get to hunt it earlier in the bow season. It means that there's a huntable population in that unit. So there's ways to kind of look around the statistics. So I don't think there's a best state for this guy to apply for. I think it's just looking at the states, trying to build knowledge. And there's a lot of good high country mule deer hunting or early season mule deer hunting across the country. And heck, if you want to come to Montana in September, there's so many deer that get harvested, and here we've talked about Montana, but there's a lot of bucks that get harvested during our general rifle. Well, if you go hunt them in September while everybody's hunting elk, all the pressure's off, and there's quite a few mule deer on our public ground that haven't been chased off yet. So you can find some dynamite mule deer hunting in some of these off states, and we even have some high country opportunities with the bow. My best buck came from Montana high country. It's not going to be easy. There's a couple different mountain ranges that hold them, but there is opportunity out there. It's just with low points, you're going to have to take a chance.
Yep, exactly. And I think that answers Dustin_Wayne's question too. What's the best way to hunt good mule deer country every year without needing points? I think you hit the nail on the head on that for sure, Brian.
Yep. And mule deer this year, I had a really good mule deer season. So if you look back at the mule deer tags that I had, the places that I harvested bucks, one was a 0 point draw. One was a 0 point draw, and one was a general season. So I went 3 for 5 this year on mule deer, and actually one of the ones that I struck out on took me 4 points to draw. So the places where I harvested bucks, I harvested 3 mature bucks that I drew all of those with 0 points.
That's a good testament right there. Yeah, that brings up another conversation too with point creep and what things are doing. And it seems like to me a lot of these units that have point crept, they're not the hunt that you think they would be for as many points as they take. I've seen that a lot in a lot of the Western states. And so keep that in mind too. That's where local knowledge comes in handy, whether you connect with somebody on social media or go to the hunting shows and talk to guys. But a lot of units in Wyoming too, I can speak for Wyoming deer, areas that aren't Western Wyoming. I look at the number of points that it takes to draw these tags, and I grimace because I've hunted them with friends or coworkers, and it's like, man, I would be very disappointed if I spent 15 points on that unit. So keep that in mind too. Don't get caught up thinking that a 15-point tag is going to be an excellent hunt, because it can be quite the opposite.
Yeah, more points does not equal a better unit all the time. It's units get popular, and then there's trends in these units too. They get worse and they get better due to management or due to winners. And so yeah, that's a big part, is just like keeping your thumb on the pulse. So I've got another question here from Tyler Jacobson. So what do you guys think the best way to apply for several swing for the fence tags? Is there a risk of drawing too many tags, like you can't return a Wyoming or a New Mexico tag?
Yeah, there's a risk. I've never had the problem. I wish I did.
Yeah.
But I think with a lot of these swing to the fences tags, under 3% odds, I don't think you're going to get into trouble very quick with drawing too many of those. What's your experience, Brian?
Yeah, I'm the same. I've never drawn too many good tags. I've had a busy season, and I do, when I'm swinging for the fence or applying for these tags, I do try to put it in the back of my head that I may draw it. Like maybe not a 1% draw, but if I'm applying for a good New Mexico tag for elk, I'm also thinking about how I can hunt that tag if I draw it. Okay, so I've got to go to Montana later to hunt elk because I've drawn this tag that's September 1st to the 15th. Like, I've got to keep that in my window that I may draw that tag. But yeah, I'm with you, Dan. If you're swinging for the fence in a lot of these states, I mean, it pays to like really space out your hunts or try to figure out the logistics of how you can hunt it. But I've just never had that problem. Like these premium I have never drawn a premium elk tag. Like and deer tags, like I've maybe had a couple that could be considered premium or good tags, but it's not like hunting the Ponsagon or something. So like I've never drawn a good elk tag. So therefore my reasoning behind like, applying for these swing for the fence is like, if I draw it, I'll figure it out and find a way to hunt it, and I'll put off something else. Like I get to hunt Montana every year. So if I draw a really quality elk tag, I may give up a lot of my Montana hunting to be able to go hunt this premium elk tag that I've waited years and got really lucky drawing the tag. So that's kind of the way I look at it. But I do like to logistically look at these premium tags and figure out how I would hunt it if I did draw it.
That's a great point. I do pay attention to season dates in like New Mexico. If I put in for the early one, the first half of September, or the late half, I look at my schedule, and then I do a plan for these swing for the fences tags. I plan accordingly. If I were to draw those, like I don't want too many dates overlapping, so there is an issue. So I still apply accordingly what my schedule may look like. So I do keep that in mind, but I've never had a problem with it because I've never drawn anything either. Jen's Paint, is there ever a time and place that you will consider using a tree stand to hunt elk or deer? What's your answer, Brian? I know your answer to this, I think.
Never. I don't even know what a tree stand is. What is that weird word? Yeah, I don't know that I could sit in one of those things. I don't, but I do think it's good to think outside the box. And I know guys have had success using them, and it's a bit of a low impact to the area that you're hunting. You just have to make sure the area you're hunting has game, and then you can go in low impact. And if sitting a tree stand or sitting a blind is like the way you think about hunting, like the opportunity is good when they finally walk by a tree stand. So it's not right for me, as I take like this Western hunting approach of really running and gunning. But for some guys, I don't think it's a bad idea. And I had this idea about 15 years ago. I used to hunt this elk spot that I'd go way back into, and there was elk all over during this time of year. And I actually like started thinking about like, God, if I put a tree stand on this saddle, there's elk that come through it every single day. So I have had that thought pop into my head before. I've just never followed through with it.
Yep. No, exactly. Kind of the same for me. I have hunted, I'll sit water. I've done that in the past. It's not a number one choice of tactic. If I go into an area and I want to be really low impact, maybe to start off, I may just sit water if I see a good sign, and I may spend a day there. That usually doesn't include a tree stand. And then it seems like most of the hunting I do is for video. So I'm videoing it. And in my opinion, tree stand hunting is boring, and viewers find it a little bit boring. So I like to do more of a Western style hunting and stay out of the tree stands and hopefully make some videos that are a little bit more interesting, but a very effective tactic. Maybe if you're just starting out, you're a new bow hunter, or you're a whitetail only hunter guy, you're gonna be hunting tree stands probably a lot. But I highly recommend it if for success. It's a great way to be successful if your skill set hasn't developed yet, especially, or if the situation, if you're hunting a small property, you don't want to blow the animals off the property, you want to hunt low impact, sit a tree stand. That's kind of my theory.
Yep.
AB Fromco, what are your no-brainer states for trophy species, moose, sheep, and goat for non-residents? What's yours, Brian? That's a good one.
Yeah, so moose, sheep, and goat, obviously in my home state of Montana, because I have the best drawing odds and it's the best sheep hunting in the world for bighorns. So that's definitely a go-to. I mean, I kind of shoot for the fence all over. Now, moose isn't something that really gets me fired up, so I apply for that in Montana. Even though I have seen some pretty good units here lately for moose. In fact, I found a paddle just a couple weeks ago and saw some good bulls in there. That I had that Shiras hunt last year. And even though it's got me definitely thinking about moose, like applying for it in Idaho. Now, Idaho's a great state for moose, sheep, and goat because they don't have points, and then they make their residents and non-residents pick one species. So you either have to pick moose, sheep, goat, or deer, elk, and you can only apply for one. And so your odds go way up. So I definitely like that state. I'm not a Wyoming. I don't, again, it's like Dan, I don't waste my money there because the tags go to the most points holder and then they do a random draw, but I just don't have a chance to catch the point creep and have a legit chance at drawing one of those tags. New Mexico's a go-to for me because there's no points and I have a really good chance to draw a tag there. I do apply in Colorado. They have an archery only tag for rams. You got to have 3 points to even get in the drawing. I've been applying there for a lot of years. I really like Nevada. Nevada has like different sheep species that I can apply for there. But basically, moose, sheep, and goat is a lotto ticket. It's like you have got to get really lucky no matter which state you're applying for to be able to draw them. And I do play the game in most of the Western states that make sense for me, where I already have a license, where I can put my name in the hat. But the truth of the matter is it's a lotto ticket. You got to get really lucky.
Yep, exactly. Well said. There's really not like a no-brainer state other than what Brian just illustrated there. For example, I'm from Montana, so I started buying moose points, moose, sheep, and goat points when I was young. I have 23 moose points, and I think my odds still in the limited areas that I can apply for as a non-resident are still 5% or less. So it's not a no-brainer by any means. If I was a non-resident and I didn't have any points, I probably wouldn't even do Montana because of the point structure, and just there's not enough tags in the system to accommodate the point system for applicants. So it doesn't really do anything. For example, like, there's only a handful of guys that have 23 points, but there's 20 times that for guys that have 6, 7, 8 points. And so still there's so many other applicants, it just dilutes my odds because it's a bonus system. And so, yeah, it's kind of one of those deals. I could be applying for another 20 years and not draw just because of point creep and declining of tags and being a non-resident. It's just very tough. It's a lotto ticket. I play the game because I'm invested in it. And then, of course, I'm a Wyoming resident, so I do apply here. And then, yeah, I think Brian gave some great advice for some of these other states. Gents Paint, another question here. What does your ideal day look like when spot and stock hunting elk?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so my ideal day spot and stock hunting elk. Man, it's like my ideal day, I think. Usually I'm headed into an area and I'm hunting like what's called a mobile vantage point instead of a master vantage point. So a master vantage point, I'm going to sit where I can see the most. And I will do that from time to time, but the majority of time I want to get into country and I want to look at the smaller parks and look at these areas that have less foot traffic. So my ideal day is usually starting at about 4 in the morning, and it's hiking like a couple hours into a spot where when the lights come on, I'm in a good place to see elk. And then I'm going to work a ridge line and just be glassing and listening in all these parks and these openings. And I also use that morning, that 4 to 6:30 before the sun comes up, I'm listening for bugles as I'm hiking in. And if I hear a bugle, well, then I'll try to get to a position to maybe see that elk or get eyes on them. Like after I hear an elk, I'm always trying to get my eyes on them. Sometimes it's not possible as they're in the timber, but I think you really have to be focused morning and night. So I'm making this intentional effort early morning to get into a spot. I'm working a mobile vantage point. Like, if you don't start in that early morning, like I had this elk spot this year that was full of elk that was in, I called it the middle of the middle because it was the furthest place away from all access points. I would get in there, I'd have awesome action in the morning, and then I put these bulls to bed, and then I'd be sitting there, and at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'd hear some guys come over the ridge and start bugling in this basin. Like they have no idea that they're bugling into this basin that is absolutely full of elk, but they didn't get there at the right time. So they get no answers. They don't know the elk are there. They end up hiking around all day and not getting into them. Where me, I was into the elk at first light. Now I'm sitting on them in their bed, and I'm going to get on them again in the afternoon, evening. So like if I get on elk and can make it to them in the morning, I'm going to go try to play the game, but I'm not going to pressure them too hard into their bedroom. So then I'm going to pressure them or see if I can get on them as the winds start to change. It gets late morning. They're not bugling as much. They get in the timber. Then I'm going to wait it out, and I'm going to spend the day usually waiting. And then my best chance to kill a bull is when I know there's a big 6 point in an area, and in the evening he comes out into these parks and I've got a downhill thermal, and now I can make an approach. So my ideal day would be locating elk in the morning, chasing them in the morning. Maybe I get a chance, maybe I don't, but I don't spook them. And then I'm going to play them in the evening when they come out in those parks. And it makes for long middles of the day where they're not moving, but that's kind of how I play it for elk season, or my ideal day spot and stock hunting.
I love it. I love it. So my ideal day, as I'm thinking here, is, and I'll try to keep this short, open country, preferably an area that I've already hunted before. I already have elk located, but open country, sagebrush, 15 to 20 mile an hour wind, rain. And why I like that combination right there is elk tend to be a little less active, less moving around, maybe laying down a little bit more. But if you don't have to worry about the wind, you got cover. I've got some sagebrush. I can stalk right in on them downwind at any time during the day, as long as I can see them, and probably get a shot. And so it's the conditions that make it ideal for me, is the perfect conditions for stalking. I love stalking in the rain like that. Little rain, little wind. It's quiet. Your noise is covered. You can get away with a little bit more. And if you can see them, man, you can get right up on them. So that's my ideal day. It seems like I'm due for a day like that, spot and stalk elk hunting. But man, it just makes it so much easier when you have that great wind and some rain, and less people are out hunting. And so, yeah, love it.
Yeah, I killed my bull in a rainstorm with wind like you're talking about this year. So that I did get your ideal day this year.
Nice. I'm jealous. I'm jealous. All right. Curtis dot Pedro, Nevada. Apply for units with higher odds or higher tag number to try and pick up an alternate. I think you kind of covered that a little bit, Brian.
Yeah, so there's yeah, in Nevada. Well, and I don't know if this is the question he's posing, but a lot of times I look at these tags, and you get your drawing odds, right? So you got 5% to draw. But say you got 5% to draw for 5 tags, or you get 5% draw of 30 tags. I do think like I'm sure somebody like Guy is really good with numbers and odds and statistics. He's probably the guy to talk to. But in my mind, even though it's a 5% and 5% draw odds, I feel like I've got a better chance to draw one of those 30 tags with that 5% draw odds, because they're going to pull more tags out. So there's more chances with that 5% in there, if that makes sense. But that's just one of the things I kind of run through in my head when I'm applying for units.
I believe that's a fact, Brian. Actually, in Wyoming, over the last 10 years, I've applied for antelope, 30 to 50% odds, usually lower tag allocated areas. I've drawn 2 times in 10 years. So I think there's like a hidden or an unwritten statistic or a factor that plays in just to the duration, the number of tags that are drawn for an area. Your odds do go up a little bit if there's a higher chance. So there is something to be said for that. 100%. I'm a believer. Okay, Finn.Beagle. What's the strategy for our kids in 10, 50, 100 years? Will there be tags OTC? Eesh.
Man, it's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, I think the over-the-counter opportunities, we're starting to see it go away in places like Idaho and places like Arizona. Like, those have been over-the-counter tags. I mean, Montana, they've been easy to draw for non-residents, and now they're getting tougher and tougher. So, I mean, I think there will be over-the-counter opportunities possibly in your home state, but it's going to get a lot tougher to be picking up tags for kids or for yourself going forward, as there's just a lot of guys that are enjoying hunting and enjoying traveling. So I think it goes back to, our original statement of like trying to figure out these hidden units that you can draw. And a lot of the units that I hunt, I haven't seen point creep in, because they're a bit of secret units, or, like maybe they're getting a little bit more popular, but it's like tags that I could draw with 1 point 10 years ago, I can still draw with 1 point now today. So there's like these hidden gems or these hidden units that if you spend your time in, if you learn, if you do your research, you can find these states that you can hunt every year or every other year. And again, like, my mule deer tags this year, 4 out of the 5 tags that I drew were with 0 points. So there's still opportunities out there to draw these tags and go hunt these places. But I think it's the same thing for yourself as it will be for your kids, is you've got to start to research and build some points for your kids and start to build a short-term, mid-term, and long-term plan for where you want to hunt.
Yep, that's answered pretty well, I think. For short, in 50 years, I don't think there'll be any OTC. I think it'll be special to get a cow tag at that time. That's my hunch. It definitely sounds Debbie Downer of me, but I think there's going to be outliers for the next 20 years, like what Brian's talking about, where there will be OTC stuff, but it's not going to get any more abundant. It is kind of what I'm feeling. Do you have some more questions from your inbox, Brian? I have a few here that we can finish this up. What do you think?
Yeah. Go ahead and go through.
Okay.
I think I've hit all. Just search through as you're running through questions and see if there's anything I missed here. Yep, I think I covered most of mine. Let me just look through as you're asking these questions, Dan.
Okay, yeah, and I can answer this one real quick. This is actually a good question from Nicholas Roberts. How to determine road closure, gated roads, etc. Hunting apps often seem not updated. What I do is I like to go to the state forest. Well, it's federal because it's Forest Service, but the forest name, so like the Shoshone National Forest or the Caribou-Targhee National Forest, I go to there, I find that office online, Forest Service office, and usually they have a ORV or a motorized restriction use map, and it'll show you the gates, it'll show you the season dates, and it'll show you more than what some of these hunting apps will show you. And so, especially if I'm new to the area, I always go to the Forest Service office, the website, the forest website and look for the off-road use maps, and those seem to be pretty accurate. I was surprised this last year on my Idaho elk hunt. I showed up and I completely planned for this trail to be open to dirt bikes and motorized use, and it was closed. They were doing a logging operation in there, and they closed the road, and so there was no motorized use. But with that logging operation, the elk were just hitting it like crazy, and so it actually made it better hunting because you couldn't drive in there until some guys from Utah drove in there and blew them all out. But we'll not get into that. so yeah.
Yeah, man, it's tough. That's really good insight, Dan, and that is the best way to figure it out. But a lot of it's such a gray area, and as you get out of the national forest and you get to BLM and state land, it's even more vague. And so, like, basically, my rule of thumb is like I look for county roads, and county roads are maintained and you're able to drive those roads. So usually county roads will lead me to the public, and then any road jumping off a county road, if it jumps off on public and keeps on public, I usually figure that I can drive it. Now, if it jumps off onto private and then goes to public, usually those are a no-go. But there's so many gray areas, even on the Forest Service maps, like Dan was talking about, that discrepancy. I mean, in Idaho, I mean, any state really, it's like this learning curve, and you almost have to get there and put boots to ground and then go look at these roadways, and then it's tough to tell. Like, some of these roads will have no trespassing on them, but you can drive the road to then access your public, and then some have no trespassing, which means it's private land and you can't go through. It's a really gray area, and there isn't any app that has it sorted out. There's not one resource that has it sorted out. It's a really gray area that you look at the Forest Service. I thought that was a great tip by Dan, but a lot of these roads, you just got to go suss out. You got to go look at and just see if you can drive them or if you can't. But that's kind of my rule of thumb. But it's a real gray area.
Definitely. And yeah, I totally spaced BLM thing. Depending on your area, if you have a lot of BLM or wherever you are, you can once again call that district office or that local office, and their BLM also produces maps. A lot of them are accessible on the website. They do offer them in print, of course, as well, but they will show like the designated routes that can help you out on BLM. And like Brian said, it's gray area, and what I've done in the past, if it's not like very obviously posted, I'll drive on tracks that are established. So like just not some moron that drove out across the prairie once, which you can tell. But if it's an established track that has been driven on in the past and it's BLM, I'll drive out there. It's probably legal. But yeah, if you're not sure, call a warden, visit the local BLM office, or contact the state for state land. Usually state's pretty good about being posted if it's not drivable, but if there's an established track on state and there's like a gate and it's not posted, you can usually drive on that track. That's been my experience.
Yeah, well, then I've seen routes that are false marked. Like, they're marked on my map that I can drive them and they're an access point, and then I go and there's a gate there and it's locked. And like, I had one place where a landowner tried to run me off, and it was a established route to get to this public land, and he said that I couldn't drive, and I apologized, and I said, yeah, it shows a route on my map, and he says, no, that's from 1979. So then I drove out, I started looking at my map, I'm like, that is a route on my current map. So I called the warden and told him what had happened, and he says, that is a legal access. You go drive that legal access, and if he gives you any more problem, you have him contact me. But that's what, like, the gray areas we're dealing with, is a lot of it is false marked, and locks where there shouldn't be locks, and then some of them are established tracks that you can drive that do cross private, but they're an access to your public. But yeah, it's just a really gray area. There is, I like contacting that BLM service like you're talking about, and like you say, Dan, it's like the main routes you can kind of figure out. So then you have to go off those main routes. It's mostly the side tracks and smaller roads that are really gray.
Yep, exactly. Well said. A couple quick ones here. We're down to the last two. Brian Sentman. Yeah, Brian, I know him pretty well. We've conversed about elk hunting over the years. Burn Wyoming antelope points, or are they really struggling statewide? South half of the state struggles. The west half, southwest half, they experienced a lot of die off. The northern half of the state, not so bad. You could burn your points up north, north central, or northeastern. A lot of private out northeastern. So it is hit or miss too. So man, a little inside info, a little bit of knowledge to somebody that lives there is super handy. But I can speak as a whole, the southern part of the state and the southwestern part of the state took a hit. And yeah, I would probably give it a few years off. That's my opinion. And you can kind of see the reflection that Wyoming Game and Fish did with tag, like units that they really cut tag numbers. That'll give you an idea of the areas that really took the brunt of it, in areas that didn't get cut or maybe increased, which I saw a couple last year. Yeah, those are also very distinguishable in the regulations as well, for you to figure out what's going to be a go or a no. The last one, good old Forrest from West Virginia. If you were to name your top 3 best value states for each of the main 3, elk, mule deer, and pronghorn, what states would they be and why? Wyoming is probably top of my list. We have good hunting for all 3. I would wait on the mule deer, of course. Tag prices aren't crazy. I think an antelope tag here is, for the regular draw, it's in the 300s, $350, 360. Montana's similar, I believe. So I would say Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho probably. Idaho's not known for giant antelope bucks, but value-wise, that's probably your best bet. And throw Colorado in there as well for not being outrageously expensive. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, it's tough. It seems like the tag amounts all run similar per state. So there's like no like real solid deal for like drawing these things, you know? I think it's just investing in a state where you can have a quality hunt. In you know, some of these states like Nevada require you to buy a hunting license, or like Utah require you to buy a hunting license. So you have to factor that into your tag amount by the end of the year. And then, you know, even though Wyoming is like a good value and you can get good hunting, the points are outrageous to buy points for deer and elk every year. So you're investing hundreds of dollars into these points to eventually draw it, you know, 3 to 6 years down the road. So, you know, I don't think there's any good deal. I think it's just finding these states that really make sense for you, where you can build points, where you can have a quality experience. And so, you know, I think it's like kind of the states that you have inside information or quality hunting on. Like, you know, for Dan and I, of course, it makes sense, the Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, because I live in Montana and those are like my northern states that I know the most about. So, you know, those ones really make sense. Nevada makes sense for me, even though I have that $150 license. I tend to pick up mule deer tags there in these less popular units, and so I can hunt there quite a bit and have a real quality experience. You know, states like the New Mexico or Utah or Arizona is a lot further for me to travel, and the premium tags are tougher to draw, and so I might have more investing into those states trying to draw those tags. So it's like tough for like a good value for these states. I think I just choose these states where you can draw these tags with not an obscene amount of points, where you can have a quality experience. So I think it's whatever makes sense to the individual.
Yep. Well said.
Yep.
Well said.
Yep. I had one more question that I wanted to run through. It was a question about antelope. A guy that was planning on drawing Montana and then hunting antelope during the archery and the rifle. I will say that the archery seasons are better where there's more antelope on public ground. Our rifle seasons, when they open early October, they really run a lot of those antelope off that public ground. So it can be tougher with a rifle to get that opportunity. But I will say, like, our eastern part of the state is not doing good for mule deer numbers and mule deer populations, but it is doing great for antelope. So I think that eastern side of the state, that region 7, I think is a great place to go hunt antelope for both seasons. I also think The central part of the state, the region 4, that Missouri Breaks country is always really good. And so, like, if I was coming to Montana to target and hunt antelope, those would be the 2 areas, or will be the 2 areas, if I draw an antelope tag next year, that I'll really focus on, where it can grow big ones. They have good populations, a lot of public ground, or a decent amount of public ground where these antelope will be on. So that would be where I'd target for Montana.
Yep, perfect. Well said. A couple quick ones here. This one, Nick Brown, I have max points for mule deer in Wyoming. What unit should I be looking at in the next 5 years? I'll send you a DM, Nick, on that. Historically, like max points, there's that rut hunt out of Du Bois, which is probably the highest profile there. It's a November hunt. Big bucks on there. Once again, those deer did okay-ish on the Du Bois side compared to Western Wyoming. And so I would consider that the next 5. And then the southwest portion, there's a cluster of 3 units down on the Utah border, which are historically max points areas. I would wait for that for 5 years as well. There's a couple other units, 90, 87, 89, south central part, which are historically good. I would say that those 3 units are not what they're cracked up to be. I wouldn't burn all your points on that. So I would say, honestly, let's narrow it down to Du Bois, that late season hunt out of Du Bois if you have max points.
Man, I just saw that Beyond the Grid with Todd on there that you hunted
Yep.
with him last year, that migration hunt. Man, were you guys into some bucks last year? That looked like a great one.
Yeah, it's different. It was fun. It's almost, there are so many deer. And, the Clark Fork side, the Wyoming side, our deer didn't get completely destroyed and hammered by that winter. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I would hate to tell somebody to burn max points on that hunt just because quality really isn't there. But if you're going to be happy with seeing, 80, $100 a hunt, I mean, it's definitely, it was a fun one. But for some reason, you just don't see a lot of older deer. I don't know what that's all about, or maybe it's just antler size, but they're there. You look hard enough, you're going to find some good ones. So that could be another one that's up there. It doesn't take max points, but yeah, that was kind of a treat, honestly, just to be a part of that and to watch deer and, hunt during the rut. A lot of fun. Okay. This is the last one. And Brian, I think you pretty much answered it. As non-residents of Nevada, what do you guys look for when applying between deer, antelope, and elk? That's from Honker Cowell.
Yeah, I don't apply for antelope there. But deer and elk I do apply for. So elk is a bit of a wait. Elk are always a tougher draw, it seems like. There's just a lot of guys that want to hunt them during the rut with a bow and also with a rifle as well. So yeah, I'm just looking for tags that I have a reasonable chance at drawing. Now I have that elk unit that I've hunted in, and I've hunted deer in that unit. So I've got personal experience there is one of the reasons I apply for that. And then I'll kind of shoot for the stars on some of my other choices. And then mule deer, I'm fairly aggressive, and I have struck out in Nevada. Again, these units have trends. And so like you can pick a unit that was good a few years ago and it may not be good anymore, or there's a unit that I hunted last year that's on the up, where I used to be able to draw that thing every year. There was leftover tags, and now it's a more sought after unit. And I actually got lucky drawing it with limited points last year, but it's on the upswing, and it was really good when I went and hunted it. So I think it's just keeping your finger on the pulse. I'm more aggressive on my deer units because I want to hunt them with my bow, and the season opens August 10th down there, so it's good dates for me. So I'm fairly aggressive. And then elk tags are just tough there no matter how you shake it. And then I don't know much about the antelope down there.
I know there's good units. You see good bucks coming out of there every year. It's one of those things, like it's a long ways to travel, and if I'm going and doing out of state hunts, I'm more gravitating towards elk. And so I apply for all these Western states, and there's just so few archery elk tags that I don't even go after it. That's just one that's not on the list for me. I guess you can't do them all. But yeah, I might be missing out. Some guys really can't believe that I don't apply for elk in Nevada, but it's like, man, I apply for New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, Montana. I used to apply for Oregon. I don't even do that anymore. So yeah, you could really break the bank if a guy wanted to.
Oh man, 100%. Yeah, you just got to pick and choose. At Colorado too, I don't know. I'm kind of trapped in there with my points. My points cost me so much a year, and I've like lost those units due to point creep. So there are like a lot of general season units or over the counter units that you can get there. But I'm kind of stuck in the middle where now I've got enough points where I don't really want to pull the trigger on one of those hunts, but then I also can't draw any of the premium units. So I'm stuck in kind of the middle ground in Colorado for me.
Yeah, it's a funny place. It can be like that. And I'm the same way. I don't even know why I have 10 deer points in Colorado, because most of the archery hunts that I would do don't take very many points. And then you have, some of the areas that take a ton of points, mid 20s. And so it's like, what am I doing? I don't really have a plan, but I have 10 points for deer in Colorado. So, all right. Wow. That was quite the answer session. We appreciate everybody that submitted questions. I think we should do more of these, Brian, in the future. This is our second one. They're pretty fun. You get to see questions that you maybe wouldn't think about every day, and we sure appreciate you guys listening to the podcast. Leave us a review and keep submitting questions, and we'll keep talking about them.
Yeah, 100%. I like it too. We were able to hit a bunch of different subjects, but we did turn our hour podcast into an hour and a half podcast every time we answer questions. So you get a little bit more bang for your buck.
Exactly. And I think we covered all of them. That's important to us too. We want to make sure everybody gets covered, and shout outs and all that fun stuff. And yeah, sometimes they run a little long, but it's good conversations. I really enjoyed this one, Brian.
Yep, for sure. Yep, me too. So good luck in the draws, Dan. We'll get applying and start planning out this 2024. So yeah, thanks again to the audience. We really appreciate you guys. And yeah, that's a wrap. We'll check in with you here next week.
Sounds good.